Good evening, fellow followers of the macabre. Reminds me a bit of Alfred Hitchcock, wouldn't you say? Let's give that a try. Good evening. Maybe not. Maybe we'll just leave that to good old Hitch himself, leave it to his legacy. Welcome one and all to another episode of Joe Townsel's Dreadtime Stories. Tonight, rites of passage. Passings of the torch that will burn you if you're not careful. Small town inertia. It can offer safety and security for some, yet enslave others. But for young, soon-to-be high school graduate Sheldon Sagasser, the true nature of the quaint hamlet of Havensburg will soon be revealed and exposed. I hope you'll post your comments along the way. I see comments are coming in already. I appreciate that. We'll have a little chat after tonight's story, but without further ado, here is Graduation Day. Commencement is often described as an enforced ending to one stage of life, leading to the mandatory beginning of the next. And, with good reason, new opportunities are presented to some, yet denied to others. Childish cliques evolve and mutate into full-fledged social inequity and injustice. Some are granted power, the rest become shackled by that power, or worst, doomed. Today is graduation day. In most ways that don't matter, it is the same as all such occasions that preceded it. In one way that certainly will matter, it will be a commencement that will be remembered in infamy. Earlier that graduation day, Sheldon Sagasser visited the high school auditorium, by far the largest gathering place in Havensburg. Obscenely so. He collected his final thoughts before the inevitable ceremony. For better or worse, redemption or damnation, he had put himself on a path of no return. He hoped the inevitable consequences would be vanquished by the potential rewards. Later, Sheldon relaxed a bit after delivering his valedictorian speech. High school had been a breeze, and graduating at the top of his class was never in doubt. So it was no surprise that being Havensburg's best and brightest filled him with both dread and fear. But for now, in the calm before the storm, the tension had lifted. But only for now. Sheldon discreetly patted the right front pocket of his slacks, currently hidden by his graduation gown, to make sure the Smith & Wesson was still there. He found that it was, and felt reassured. No one would ever suspect Havensburg High's star student of smuggling a handgun onto school grounds. For the latter half of his senior year, Sheldon made a point of becoming friendly with Lyndall Fetters, the school's dim-witted security guard. So, today, when the metal detector went off, good old Lyndall just waved Sheldon right on through. A little more tricky was stealing the weapon from the town's armory earlier, although much of that challenge was the result of Sheldon's own paranoia. Before leaving the secured building, the soft sounds of distant footsteps in an adjacent hall made poor Sheldon nearly pissed his pants. He drew the weapon instinctively, but put it back under his robe quickly when he realized the footsteps were moving away from him. A new maximum security armory was ordered and ratified by the town council over a century prior. At that time, all privately owned weapons were confiscated. It was a clear violation of the Second Amendment, although everyone in town over the age of 10 knew that the U.S. Constitution was observed only when it didn't contradict Havensburg's local municipal charter. Sheldon smiled and relaxed a little. The irony didn't escape him. The ban on privately owned guns actually presented an irresistible opportunity for the soon-to-be graduate. Too bad it never occurred to anyone that Sheldon might borrow his father's passkey to the armory. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree, especially in Havensburg. Sheldon's father, Quentin Sagasser, was a highly respected pillar of the community. Sheldon expected he would be required to follow in his father's footsteps, and hoped he wouldn't have to kill his own father later. Sheldon was not yet immune to the memories of what was undeniably a more or less happy childhood, and his father's role in his son's youth. Yet Sheldon felt a sense of self-awe that his resolve and determination continued to solidify as graduation day came rushing toward him like a lethal freight train. Quentin had always been the mayor, as well as the owner and publisher of the Havensburg Herald. Yet, it seemed like this would create a conflict of interest. But in a town where no one moved in, and the only new residents were babies born within the city limits, the most capable people had to sometimes perform double duty for the good of the town. There was a joke Sheldon himself started when he was a young, smart-ass kid. The elder Sagasser was duty-bound to show irritation, but privately applauded his son's sharp wit. Sheldon's joke? If it wasn't in the Havensburg Herald, it didn't happen. Sheldon realized later that there was far more truth in that statement than he could ever know. But today, there will be much more in the local rag than the standard high school graduation coverage. And it was all destined to happen very soon. Sheldon stopped daydreaming and snapped back into focus when he saw that the conventional commencement ceremony was coming to a close. In a few minutes, the infamous life assignment ceremony would begin. That would determine the fates of everyone in the year's graduating class. We want to thank everyone for attending our ceremony. It was the voice of the high school principal, Gerald Offey, a pompous ass if there ever was one. Offey took great delight in dominating 400 high school students, unable to fight back. At least, until today. Since his days as a disrespected algebra teacher, 2 generations of students delighted in Gerald Offey's nicknames, either Jack or Jerk. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you this year's graduating class. The obligatory cheers, just like poor theater, empty and devoid of meaning. Those parents of our graduates here on stage with me, please remain. Everyone else, you are excused. Offey dismissed them like a classroom full of adolescents instead of addressing adults, most of whom could buy or sell him many times over, even in the small town's modest economy. With that directive, most of the audience made their way out of the school auditorium. Within minutes, only those mandated to attend the life assignment ceremony remained. With the audience seating now mostly vacated, save for the graduates themselves, the huge auditorium now became a more intimate and eerie venue. Quentin Sagasser approached the podium. He dismissed Offey with a quick wave of his weathered hand. Everyone knew that the once intimidating figure of Quentin Sagasser was being consumed by cancer, and was literally half the man he used to be. He and his wife, Helen, had their only son late in life. The town council had expressed concern over his lack of progeny. In fact, Positions on the town council were lifetime appointments. But like the dynasties of ancient history, new blood had to infuse the community eventually. It was obvious to everyone in town that Sheldon's fate would be sealed in the next few minutes. His father addressed the graduates and their proud but nervous parents. "Thank you, Principal Offie, and to all of you for remaining for our lifetime assignment ceremony. As tradition dictates, it is our duty today to put our invaluable graduates on the road to their destinies." Quentin's address was interrupted by a coughing fit, but he waved it off as he did earlier with Offie. "Some of our graduates will be permitted to leave our little town, probably never to return. Of course, they are always welcome to come back to the fold, but historically, this is very unlikely. We will wish them well and allow them to make their mark elsewhere in the world." Mayor Quentin Sagasser read the names of those who were leaving Havensburg forever. As expected, most were joyous, others terrified. Either way, there were no surprises. And, either way, their parents were heartbroken, knowing they would never see their children again. Also, as expected, some of the graduates viewed this mandated exit from the town as liberation, while others saw it as exile, or both. Ultimately, 45 of the 80 graduates were named for release. Quentin turned toward the graduating class. "Young ladies and gentlemen, know that everyone in your community is very proud of you, and we all know you'll accomplish great things in your new life." Several members of the Havensburg Sheriff's Office had entered the auditorium. "Now, please rejoin your parents. The deputies will escort you all to the Havensburg city limits, where you can say your final goodbyes before leaving our town." Sheldon and the other remaining graduates watched their former classmates comply with the mayor's directive. Goodbyes had already been said in anticipation of their departure, and they all left the auditorium in silence. As Sheldon watched them leave, it occurred to him that they were the malcontents and underachievers of their school. Always had been. His father's prediction of them accomplishing great things may have been premature, or simply a good-hearted lie. If Sheldon was successful, he would soon join them in their exodus out of this godforsaken prison, disguised as a small town. Sheldon had always been curious about how exactly one left Havensburg. The township was situated in a valley, completely surrounded by a majestic mountain range. Very picturesque, probably very difficult to escape. He would soon find out. His father resumed his address. His tone grew more reflective and a little more fatigued. Traits of speech that would not have surfaced when he was a younger, more robust man. "I have presided over more ceremonies like this than any old man could be expected to recall. But this ceremony is very special, as my only son, Sheldon, will become a vital, valuable, permanent part of our community." A great sadness darkened Quentin's face. This was perceived to be only a dramatic pause by most of the audience, but his wife and son recognized it as an emotional weakness brought on by a lifetime of guilt and regret. "You all will," Quentin continued, addressing all the graduates. "As you know from your classes in local history, and from the teachings of your parents and grandparents, Havensburg was founded as a self-contained community, devoted to shutting out the horrors of the outside world. For generations, your town leaders have dedicated themselves to providing the perfect life for the best and brightest of our progeny." Sheldon glanced at his fellow graduates. "I'll be damned," he thought. "The old man is winning them over. He hasn't lost it after all." While our methods may seem extreme to some, And while some of you may feel like prisoners for a time, I'm confident you will all embrace your life assignments and keep Havensburg the utopia in the years to come. Some scattered applause, then more. Quentin allowed it to continue until it became nearly thunderous, then motioned for quiet. Yes, thank you, everyone. With that, we'll begin to assign our graduates their roles in our community. Quentin went down the list. Most of the community's life assignments were no surprise. They often took the form of the now adult children leaving one school for another, learning their parents' businesses so the torch could be passed one day, whether the intended successor and progeny was willing. Others were assigned according to their aptitudes, as determined by the one person at Havensburg High hated more than Principal Offie, the school's guidance counselor. The reading of the assignments was going quickly, more than Sheldon had anticipated. He should not have been surprised, since after the initial remarks, there was little room for sentimentality. It was now down to business. The life assignment of the class valedictorian was always the last. Sheldon prepared himself. And the moment was upon him. His was the only name not yet said. It was now or never. And if you'll indulge me with a little fatherly pride, Quentin said, it is my extreme pleasure to assign my son, Sheldon, Havensburg's future leader and publisher of the Havensburg Herald. The thunderous applause began again. Yes, Quentin said, his eyes tearing up. Let's have a big hand for all of our future community leaders. With that, the graduates rose to their feet. Some threw their mortarboards into the air, inspiring a standing ovation from the audience. Sheldon shouted over the mayhem. Everyone, he yelled at the top of his voice. Everyone, I'd like to say something. Sheldon's father was the only one who noticed at first. His mother was still euphoric. Her baby boy wasn't leaving her. His father was not so delusional. If he didn't already know what was about to happen, he at least suspected, and his worst nightmares would come to fruition. Son, he said, the beginnings of pleading already creeping into his voice. You already made your speech. You'll have many more opportunities in the future to address the townspeople. Not if Sheldon had anything to say about it. Sheldon took the gun from his pocket and advanced on to his father. The applause and cheering quickly mutated into cries of screams of terror. I am not going to be a prisoner in this hellhole one more day, Sheldon shouted. He grabbed his father and pointed the gun at his head. Sheldon's mother screamed and fainted. I don't want to kill anyone, especially my father, but I won't hesitate if you try to stop me. Son, you don't want to do this. Trust me. Shut up. I've listened to your justifications of this place my entire life. No more. Offie made an inept attempt to sneak around behind Sheldon. The valedictorian aimed the gun dead center at the principal's forehead. I lied a minute ago, Mr. Offie, about not wanting to hurt anyone. I would just love to put a bullet right between your beady little eyes and into your tiny excuse for a brain. With that, some involuntary cheers from the graduates and terrified glares from their parents. Now back off, to his father. You and I are going to take a drive to the city limits and to wherever the exit is for this town. I have enough weapons and ammo in the car to hold off our inept police farce. Force. More giggles from the grads. More glares from the parents, not already hysterical. In the escalating chaos, Sheldon caught a fleeting glance at the one true love of his life. His sweet, unassuming, and innocent Donna. They had made brief, yet eternal eye contact at that moment. Her expression was one of pure, uncomplicated confusion and betrayal. But he had to remain strong, especially now that he was in the moment. He later regarded this false strength as pure cowardice. Sheldon only briefly considered asking his girlfriend to join him in his escape, but he dismissed that notion. Donna was a model citizen and would never defy her community's laws and assigned destinies. Sheldon was forced to admit that his high school love must be sacrificed to his own growth, lest she become so much dead weight. Mrs. Gates, a genuinely sweet and compassionate lady and Mrs. Sagerster's best friend, was tending to her. Sheldon's mother was coming to, but still not coherent, despite this sudden bravado, which felt damn good. He regretted having to resort to such extreme methods. And now, he also regretted having to leave his mother for good, without even a goodbye. And her last memory of her son would be of him terrorizing the town. But he knew if he dwelled on any of that for more than a few seconds, he might chicken out. He pointed the gun at his father's back and nudged him toward the door. "If any of you try to follow us, you will regret it." Sheldon tossed aside his mortarboard and tore off his gown, symbolizing casting off his shackles. He now had freedom of unfettered movement and intended to take full advantage. With that, father and son fled the dimly lit auditorium and emerged into the blinding sunlight. Within a minute, they were in the family SUV, Sheldon holding the gun on his father, while the elder Sagister started the ignition. He looked at his son with love and tenderness. "It's not too late, Sheldon. I can fix this." "No, Dad, just drive." As the Sagister men drove toward the city limits, a few squad cars appeared, but Quentin waved them off. He reached for his cell phone. "May I?" he asked his son. Sheldon nodded, and Quentin made his call. "Sheriff, tell your men to fall back, please. I'm escorting my son to the town exit." He looked at Sheldon with pride. He has decided he's going to make his own mark in the world. With that, the Sagisters were allowed to drive beyond the city limits and begin the stretch into the countryside. The mountains were in the distance. But not for long. Sheldon gasped as the mountains rapidly appeared before them. Within minutes, they were only yards away, mere steps to the base. Something was not right, and Sheldon, always brilliant like his father, realized what that was immediately. "The mountains are fake?" he asked, whispering in shock and awe. Yes, indeed. "And you use some kind of forced perspective to make them appear real? And at a distance, so long as you don't leave Havensburg?" Quentin nodded, again with pride. "Quite a feat of engineering, really. Your favorite principal, once upon a time, was much more than the pain-in-the-ass high school administrator you know now. As one of our top scientists, he designed the holographic emitters that create the illusion of huge mountain ranges surrounding the town." Despite himself, Sheldon was in awe of his father, and for the first time in years. Quentin let this sink in for a minute, then continued. In fact, son, just about everyone in Havensburg is much more than their day jobs reveal." "But these fake mountains can't just be prison walls, Dad. Every year you let many of the high school graduates leave. Yes, that's true. So then, where is the exit? Then, as if his voice commanded it, the holographic emitter revealed a large elevator in the artificial mountainside, doors open and waiting for a passenger. Sheldon looked at his father, baffled and amazed. If this is what you want, son, come with me. No one will try to stop us now. The elevator will take you out of this little valley to the top of the mountain. From there, it's up to you. The first of a few minor realizations occurred to Sheldon at that moment. You knew I was going to do this, didn't you, Dad? That's why it was so easy to escape the town. Quentin smiled proudly. Of course, son. Would it surprise you to learn? I tried the same thing myself when I was your age. But where I failed, maybe you'll succeed. Shall we go up? Father and son got out of the family SUV, walked to the rock face, and entered the large elevator. Sheldon pressed the up button, and the high-speed lift began its ascent to the mountaintop. The ride was rapid and utterly smooth. For a moment, Sheldon wondered if the elevator car was moving at all, and if this was just another ruse to trap him and be surrendered to the authorities for dispensation. But in less than 2 minutes, the elevator door opened to reveal the peak of the mountain and the surrounding ranges. For the first time today, Sheldon proceeded with hesitation. Not from fear or apprehension, but from wonder. The view was majestic and panoramic. He looked up at the peak. There was about another 50 feet to climb, on foot, to get over the top of the mountain and make his descent into freedom on the other side. He turned around to take one last look at Havensburg, his hometown, his prison of 18 years. This time, high above. The heavens so close, he could almost touch it. Below him was the countryside surrounding the town, and across several miles away was the far end of the mountain range, which formed the prison walls. But something was still wrong. He knew now that the mountain ranges were at least partially artificial. But now that he was looking down at Havensburg from this vantage point, the town itself somehow seemed fake. His father grew impatient. No time for sentimentality, son. If you're going to leave, do it now, please. I have business to attend to at City Hall, and I have the afternoon edition of the Herald to get out. Sheldon's heart sank with that. Business as usual, Dad? Your son is about to leave forever, after all. Quentin smiled, but there was absolutely no humor behind it. We'll know that for sure, son. Very shortly. Joe Townsel's Dreadtime Stories. Graduation Day will continue. Tonight's story is one of 6 of mine that appear in the Anticipation collection. And I'm proud to be a participant in that project. It was a project that was spearheaded by my good friend Rolando Herrera, and I'm very proud to be a participant with the other 6 authors, most especially Rondo and his wife Leah Herrera, as well as our good friend Flobo Boyce. Great stories in Anticipation, including this one, I think, and I hope you'll check it out. I invite you all to partake of the 25 mind-bending tales from all 7 scribes of the macabre. And now this.
Comes, here it comes, here it comes, here it comes. Sing, here it comes. Sing, here it comes. Not just yet.
Joe Townsel's Dreadtime Stories. Graduation Day continues. Sheldon had relaxed his defensive and offensive postures for a few moments, but went back on the clock as his anxiety resurfaced. You said no one would try to stop me. And no one will. On your way, boy. With that, Sheldon began the climb. As he neared the top, he took another look down into the valley, and Havensburg in the distance. Disorientation set in. He could see the western half of the town, but not the eastern. The other half of the town somehow disappeared beyond the horizon. How was this possible? Screw it, he thought. It didn't matter now. Escape was the only thing of importance. The escape was way too easy, no matter what Dad said. His rational mind intruded his thoughts once again, and again, his passionate mind attempted to silence it. Only a few steps to the top now. With his heart pounding, Sheldon took those final steps to stand like any proud mountain climber. He was at the very top. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He prepared to take his first look at the outside world beyond Havensburg, denied him earlier when given his life assignment and prison sentence. His new horizon was something he took by force. No wonder Dad is proud of me, he thought. Damn it, I'm proud of myself. Sheldon exhaled and opened his eyes to savor his first gaze at his freedom, the outside world. Below him, another valley at the base of the mountain range. And was that another town in the distance? He felt the same disorientation, much more paralyzing this time. Again, the far end of this town faded beyond the horizon. But it wasn't a horizon. There was no horizon. He quickly turned around to look again at the hometown he was leaving behind. He turned back the other way, making his head spin. The far ends of Havensburg and the other town weren't hidden by a horizon. They were both hidden by an extreme curve in the landscape. Sheldon didn't even feel the sharp sting in his knees when he fell to them. He also didn't hear his father walk up behind him. The western part of Havensburg was in the valley behind him. Another town was situated in an adjacent valley before him. No. What he saw before him was the eastern part of Havensburg. Sheldon suddenly felt like he needed to throw up. What the hell is this? How is this possible? His passionate mind asked. You know the answer, his logical mind responded. You just need a little time to accept what you're seeing now, his father said aloud, as if reading his son's thoughts. Like I did when I was your age. With that, Sheldon lost control and began to sob. He was afraid he had lost his mind, or soon would. His father seemed to know better and comforted his son. Come with me, Sheldon. I need to show you the rest of the puzzle. It's not so bad. You'll see. Quentin took the hand of his son, who, for a moment, was a young child again. Sheldon was in no position to resist. There was nowhere to run, after all. Father and son made the descent back to the small plateau where they had stepped off the elevator. Sheldon expected to be taken back down to the valley, but instead, Quentin gently turned him to face the mountainside on which they had just climbed down. Quentin nodded once, a signal to somebody hidden. A large section of the mountainside disappeared, just as it had done at the base of the mountain before, to reveal the elevator. This time, the hologram of the mountainside vanished to reveal an immense control room. With only a glance, Sheldon could see that the technology was entirely out of place in relation to the quiet, early 21st century village of Havensburg. The control room was a duck blind overlooking the town. "Come in, son. There's a lot to discuss. Many plans to fulfill and execute." An automatic door opened at the left of the control room. They were being greeted by a man wearing a uniform, slightly futuristic from Sheldon's point of reference. The uniformed technicians inside were entirely out of place for anyone living in the quaint hometown, living in ignorance. As they approached, Sheldon recognized their greeter. "Hello, Principal Offie," he said, still shaken, but emerging now from his shock. "But I expect that title isn't really appropriate here." Offie chuckled. "Well, you were right, Quentin," he said. "There's no getting anything by him." "Yes, that's my boy," Quentin said dryly. "Well, everyone's waiting for you both in the main conference room." Quentin nodded his thanks and escorted his son to the end of the hall of what Sheldon was seeing was an intimidating, multifunctional complex built within the artificial mountains. The automatic doors to the conference room opened to reveal most, but not all, of the town council members seated at an ornate and overly large table. Only now, instead of being dressed for their day jobs in Havensburg, they wore the same uniform that Mr. Offie had changed into. "Welcome, Messrs. Sagasur. Please have a seat." Was that Lyndall Fetters? The slow-witted high school security guard? "Lyndall?" Sheldon asked. "Everyone here is on the town council, but not you." Fetters smiled, a bit condescendingly. He neutralized his expression when he noticed Quentin's disapproval. "Well, you're a smart boy, Sheldon," he said. "By now, whatever you see in our little compound here shouldn't be much of a surprise." "No, I suppose not." Fetters repeated his request, which this time sounded a bit more like a directive. "Gentlemen, please be seated." Quentin and Sheldon sat in the two chairs at the head of the conference table closest to them. "Sheldon, you have many questions." This from Michael Nidifer, one of the grocers in Havensburg. "What is this place? How is it possible to see opposite ends of the town from the top of this mountain?" "Before we answer, what do your instincts tell you, Sheldon?" This from Evelyn Sanchez, the local librarian. "What did you experience when you saw this?" "I felt dizzy, disoriented, but the sensation didn't seem to come from within, but externally, like something in the air affecting me in this way." "Brilliant!" Fetters again. "He'll fit in fine after all." Quentin shot him a glare. "Linda, would you please shut up for just 1 minute? Yes, my son is handling this well, but is still shaken." Another realization for Sheldon. But the true revelation was still to come. Sheldon spoke again, almost in a whisper. "It's almost as if Havensburg occupies an entire planet all by itself. It's almost like... No, it's exactly like I could see all the way around the world while standing in one spot." With this, everyone in the room applauded. "You're not far off, son. In fact, I would say you've hit the nail right on the head." "But I still don't..." "No, of course you don't. But you will now." An illuminated control pad appeared on the glossy surface of the conference table. Quentin pressed a button on the pad, and the middle of the table surface responded by shining brightly. The lights in the room dimmed further, as large holograms now appeared suspended above the table. Quentin waved some kind of stylus to activate the holograms and browse their contents. It looked like blueprints? No, schematics. As the images formed, Sheldon knew exactly what they were. In fact, it couldn't be anything else. It was a detailed 3D image of a starship. It formed a perfect circle with some kind of propulsion system on either side. Essentially, an immense donut in space. We're on a spaceship? But to create the illusion of a small town in a valley surrounded by mountains inside? That sums it up, yes. But when I was standing at the top of the mountain, the curvature of the landscape was very apparent. That's what caused my disorientation? Yes, Quentin said. But you'll get used to the effect. As I said before, and you surmise, we use a combination of forced perspectives and holographic technology to make the illusion totally convincing. As long as you remain within the city limits, Sheldon said. Exactly, son. It's this technology that also tricks your mind into believing you're standing on flat ground as long as you're in Havensburg. But why? Quentin addressed Offie. Gerald, could you take it from here? Of course. Offie turned to Sheldon to explain. Sheldon, many generations ago, many centuries possibly, Earth was on the brink of destruction. Some of the great minds, technicians, and engineers built this multi-generational ark to escape the destruction of our planet and seek a new home. Our ancestors wanted to give as many people a chance as possible, but at the expense of constructing a smaller vessel that could reach new solar systems more quickly. They knew it would take several hundred years, but every day our sensors seek out a suitable world to colonize. Earth was destroyed? We assume so, but we can't be sure. We were long out of sensor range as we moved beyond our solar system. You transported an entire community off the planet based on the possibility of Earth's destruction? Not us, son, Quentin said. Our forefathers. An interesting choice of words, Quentin, Fetters said. Sheldon, you learned about the U.S. Constitution in history class, but for all we know, the Havensburg Municipal Charter is the only remaining governing document left in the human race. But why all of this? Why create this illusion of Havensburg? Why not just create a controlled society without the deception? Quentin answered. It was the wisdom of our forefathers that only some of the passengers on this vessel be aware of its true nature. To create as ordinary and normal a terrestrial environment for most of the population was deemed essential to the ultimate success of the mission. Sheldon was beginning to understand completely. Strict population control and selective revelation of the ship and its mission to more easily control the masses. Essentially, yes, Fetters said. Strict population control? Sheldon repeated this in a whisper. Then, he had one final, horrifying revelation. What about the graduate you allowed to leave? A long pause, which confirmed Sheldon's suspicions before his father answered the question. Every year, and most recently a short while ago, they are humanely executed. Sweet Jesus, Sheldon croaked. He was feeling sick again. I know how it sounds, son, but it's absolutely necessary. As you discovered today, there's nowhere for them to go, and our resources are extremely limited. We can foster and nurture only the very best of our society. Only the very best of our progeny. Quentin spoke softly to his son, for the last time. And it's time for me to retire, son. And time for you to take my place. Retire? Yes, it's my time to step down. And not just from the mayor's office and as publisher of the local paper. It's time for me to retire from Havensburg entirely. Sheldon stood suddenly, backing toward the door. He looked at the other council members with new but stunned horror. You're going to kill my father so I can take his place? Take it easy, Sheldon. His father's stern order erupted into a coughing fit. After it subsided, he said weakly, Sheldon, I'm dying, son. I don't want the townspeople... I don't want you and your mother to see me continue to waste away. My God, Sheldon thought. What the hell is wrong with me? I still have the gun. Sheldon drew the gun and, for the second time in one day, pointed it directly at Offie. This time, without hesitation, he fired the weapon. And Offie didn't fall. In fact, Sheldon could tell he was making an extreme effort to not laugh. Sheldon, we needed to allow you to steal that weapon while we lured you here. But of course, we neutralized it when you stepped through the metal detector at school. Sheldon dropped his own handgun to the floor. It was now useless. He was now useless. Fetters stood. Well, that was my idea. Fetters then drew his own weapon. But it was not like any handgun Sheldon ever saw or read about. But this welcome is fully functional, Fetters said. To Quentin, are you ready? Yes. To Sheldon, I love you, son. I know you'll make your mother proud. No! Sheldon tried to rush Fetters and Offie, but two of the council members restrained him. He never knew which two. Dad! Fetters fired the weapon at Quentin. The gun made almost no sound, and the bullet made a very small wound in his chest. There was no blood. Sheldon watched in horror as his father's body seemed to burn from within. First, his eyes and ears glowed with the destructive energy released from the bullet. Then fire seemed to consume his extremities, and finally his torso. For Sheldon, the murder of his father seemed to take an eternity. In fact, it took only seconds. He would learn later that this was the same method of execution used on the graduates to be sacrificed. It was painless. The graduates were corralled into a dim chamber with pristine metal walls, floor, and ceiling. Narrow horizontal slots opened in the walls, exposing weapons behind, similar to the one just used by Fetters to kill Sheldon's father. Moments later, nothing of the rejected, exiled, and condemned graduates remained. Not even ash. The room remained pristine. No fuss, no muss. And now, Sheldon's father was gone as well. There was no trace left of Quentin Sagasser. Sheldon wondered if his father had ever existed at all. He then collapsed onto the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. Fetters whispered to Offie while gesturing toward Sheldon. This is our new leader? Shut up, Lundell. The boy just saw his father vaporized. Maybe we can give him a minute or two to collect himself. In fact, Sheldon was given 5 minutes before he was gently reseated. Sheldon, Offie said, it's time for you to begin your destiny. I can't. Yes, you can, and you will. Your father did, and now you'll follow in his footsteps. just as it was meant to be. Sheldon couldn't speak. "Son," Fetters said, "this is not a threat." A warning glance from Offie to Fetters. "No, this is not a threat, but you can be reconditioned to assume your role in the town. We'll have your cooperation one way or the other. But if we have to go that route, you won't be the man you are today. And definitely will never become the man everyone in this room knows you can become. And it will be only temporary. A few years until we groom a more worthy replacement in a future graduating class." Offie stood and put his hand on Sheldon's shoulder. "Sheldon," Offie said, "your father told you the truth earlier. We didn't try to stop you from escaping. But now you're here. As he said, what you do now is up to you." Sheldon sat in silence. The valedictorian was again contemplating his future. 1 year later, proud parents and their children gathered at Havensburg High for graduation day. Mayor Sheldon Sagasser closed the offices of the Havensburg Herald early. He was giving his first address after the graduation ceremony, when he presided over his first life assignment ceremony. The dutiful woman assigned to be his wife would be in attendance at the commencement. Sheldon was assured by well-meaning and defeated family and friends that he would one day come to love the trophy wife and cherish his prearranged marriage. On his wedding day, the town council members reminded their new mayor and newspaper publisher of his duties as leader, husband, and father. Sheldon's own father had been slow to sire a progeny. It was kindly yet firmly suggested that Sheldon do his best to make up for lost time. Within the year, Sheldon and his wife were blessed with a son. Even a year later, Sheldon thought often of his high school sweetheart, Donna. It always brought a mixture of longing and shame. He hoped and prayed that her sentence of execution had somehow been commuted. Maybe she had been spared and was assigned to some menial job at the control center in the mountains. Or maybe someone there took pity on her and helped her escape. But to where? Yeah, Sheldon knew better. Not many, but a few, of Havensburg's secrets were denied even to the mayor and newspaper publisher. But not this one. Sheldon was privy to every name of those sacrificed for the good of the town. Every single one. And Donna's name was among them. Had he not been such a coward the year prior, maybe Sheldon himself could have saved Donna. Then, Sheldon's thoughts returned to the day 1 year prior that changed his life forever. In ways he never expected or wanted. He imagined his flight of fancy found him light on his feet, fleeing to a better life, free and unchained. Instead, in reality, he was stopped dead in his tracks. So now he looked across the stage. Sheldon made brief eye contact with his wife, offered the best smile he could manage, then looked down toward her lap. There she held their son, Quentin Sagasser II, the namesake of his late grandfather and community leader. Was the former patriarch deserving of such an honor? That was debatable, but so it was for anyone who was a co-conspirator in this dark fantasy world called Havensburg. His infant son smiled at his father, the weight of their extremely finite world heavy on his 19-year-old shoulders. Maybe this new generation, when they reach their own graduation day, would succeed where their ancestors had failed. Sheldon allowed himself a slight, self-aware smile. His final thoughts that day would turn to his late great-father, Quentin Sagasser. You know, it turned out the old man was right as rain about one very important thing. Sheldon's mother was very proud of her son. and his wife, very proud of her husband, albeit superficially. This was never more evident than on graduation day. The multi-generational starship continued its voyage through deep space. On the hull, the vessel's name was still legible after many centuries. The SS Havensburg continued its journey, seeking a new home for the descendants of the wise forefathers who escaped the extinction of their planet of origin. Graduation Day, a turning point for some, a point of no return for all. Fate and destiny are undeniable and inevitable, but the eternal question remains, are either sealed? So this, like many other dark and bizarre tales, is a story that is best told at Dreadtime. Well, I truly hope, everyone, that you enjoyed tonight's Dreadtime story, Graduation Day. And now I will have the pleasure of reading and replying to your comments. Here we go. Rafael Rosario, thank you so much for joining us, sir. Smiling Broadway, Smiling Broadly. Applause. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you enjoyed it. Oh, interesting point, Raphael. Yes, I take that as a compliment. I'm sure it was meant as such. I think this is definitely one of the ones I enjoyed adapting the most thus far. I told my partner, Mr. John Weber, that it's been a lot of fun doing these, and a big part of the fun is doing at least a partial adaptation of my written work. So I'm glad that you feel it reads like a screenplay, and I think in turn plays more or less like a little film as well. So great. Thank you. Oh, interesting question there, Mr. Weber. He asked, Joe, do we ever find out what happened to the future generations of Havensburg? Well, as it so happens, sir, I have had in the back of my twisted little mind for some time a continuation of this story. I promise it won't be a simple recap or repeat or redemption arc. It would be what I have in mind is a full-fledged, fully fleshed out sequel in the form of a novel. So stay tuned for that. But first things first, coming very soon now, my new collection called Horror Springs Eternal. And with that, I think we are ready to have a look at what's coming up in the coming days on the Weber Internet Thingy Network. Ah, yes, Mr. Weber's Webo Mystery. Mr. Keen, the Tracer of Lost Persons in Star of Death. Now, when John teased this on the last episode of Webo Mystery, I was immediately intrigued because he likened it to less of a noir vibe and more of a soap opera feel. So I find that very interesting, very intriguing. And I don't know the character very well as a result, but he seems very interesting. And I'm looking forward to listening to John and watching John present to us on Mr. Weber's Webo Mystery, Mr. Keen in the Star of Death. This comes up to us in 2 days, January 23rd, 7 p.m. PST, 10 p.m. EST. Ah, yes. This is another one to look forward to, everybody. Next time on Retro Rangers, our special guest will join us, Mike Sauter. The three of us will be watching Nero Wolf. Now, my understanding is that Mr. Wolf is a character that has been adapted on a number of occasions, but most notably, in my opinion, in 1959 in this unfortunately, unsold TV pilot. So yes, we'll be having a little watch party with Nero Wolf and his partner Archie Goodwin, and intriguingly played by two actors that we both know and love. We all know and love. William Shatner is actually second fiddle in this case, playing Archie Goodwin. And darn it, John, I don't have the name in front of me. If you can pop it on the screen real quick of who plays Nero Wolfe in this. But the gentleman that plays Nero Wolfe, it's not John Weber, despite the illustration. The person that plays Nero Wolfe played the heavy in Land of the Giants back in the 60s. So, at any rate, if we don't get you the name now, you have more than enough, I think, to entice you to join us for. John doesn't have it in front of him either. That's okay. I should have made a note of it. But at any rate, join us, John and me, and Mike Sauter, Sunday, January 26th, 5 p.m. PST and 8 p.m. EST. Oh, thank you. Yes, this is true. Joe Townsel, Dreadtime Stories appears on Weber Internet Thingy every 5 or 6 weeks, and otherwise the time is reserved for retro trekkers. So with that in mind, hey, it looks like something back a week from tonight, Tuesday, January 28th, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. EST. Yes, it is retro trekkers, but in addition to its usual aspects of being special, there are 2 very special aspects of this episode. Number one, not really retro this time. We're going to be looking at something brand new in the Star Trek universe. This is the first Trek TV movie, and it's going to be on Paramount Plus beginning this Friday. So if you want to check it out before we have the show, we hope you will. We will, of course, have a spoiler warning. Oh, John, thank you so much for the subhead there. Yes, Trek Flicks and Chill. And so we are going to be looking at something new, Section 31. I'll say right now, John and I have mixed feelings about it, but we have open minds. And we'll, of course, talk all about the movie, the usual beats, the usual discussion down and dirty for our retro trekkers next week. And the other aspect that makes this episode special is we will be joined by our good friend, Eric Kramer, joining us for the first time on Retro Trekkers. So you don't want to miss this. It's going to be a lot of fun. Kurt Kasner, thank you, Raphael. We knew you'd come through for us. Kurt Kasner, of course, is a reference to who is playing Nero Wolfe in the episode we're watching this Sunday. Thank you again, Raphael. And thank you, everyone, for coming on and for joining us. I understand Chris was a little bit under the weather. Chris, if you're still with us, I applaud you for sticking it out. If you come back and watch this later, then again, thank you for joining us for as long as you could. Do appreciate everybody participating. And I think that's going to be about it. Let me make sure I don't have any other notes here. Yes, I think I've given everyone a sufficiently disquieting nightmare for one night, for now. But as we said earlier, look for the next Joe Townsel's Dreadtime Stories next month. Until next time, stay frightened, my friends. Good night.